Welcome to ETF TV, your insight into the world of exchange-traded funds, issuers, and investments. I'm Margareta Hricova, and joining me today are Frank Koudelka, Senior Vice President, ETF Product Solutions at State Street, and Deborah Fuhr. This is part one of our conversation with Frank, where we look at the key moments that shaped the ETF industry and what is still often misunderstood about how ETFs work. Frank, Debbie, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Frank, it's great to have you on what is going to be probably one of your last interviews as you're coming up to the retirement that you recently announced. We're wondering, you've had a front row seat to the global ETF industry for nearly 2 decades. What do you see as the single most important inflection point that shaped where the ETFs are today?
Yeah, I'd say that the big pivot point that I see is when they went from being synonymous with passive to more of a view of ETF is a technology, it's a delivery mechanism. And that's transformed the way both investors and manufacturers, I believe, view the product set that can be utilized within the ETF. So early days, I would talk to active managers and they were thinking of ETFs as the enemy. It was, a passive vehicle that was the enemy of active. Now they're viewed as an enabler. So you now have the whole ecosystem of investment management able to participate, whereas a big component of that ecosystem were, in a sense, locked out because of the way ETFs had been viewed in the past. So I think, like 2008 was when they were enabled. But it really wasn't until like 2019, 2020 with the ETF rule in the US, Rule 6011, and even the introduction of semi-transparent active that really started to bring active managers to the table.
ETFs began as a niche product and are now central to global market structure. What aspect of the industry's evolution surprised you the most?
Yeah, I would say it's how they're being used, especially by central governments. And, like Debbie, we've had conversations about this. We go back to the Asian financial crisis and, Hong Kong using the formulation of the tracker fund to take the equity investments that they had made to stabilize the markets and creating a diversified fund that they can then unwind their investment without creating any turbulence in the market. And then you go to the Bank of Japan utilizing ETFs as a quantitative easing tool when interest rates went to zero. India using ETFs to divest government-owned companies and get those out to the masses, to the retail investor, and also to raise revenue. That became a fiscal tool for India. And then most recently, China, we've seen using, broad-based equity ETFs as a market stabilization tool. So I never saw that coming, and I think it's an amazing use of the technology, and it really has expanded the use case for ETFs, not just to institutional and retail investors, but to government entities.
I would totally agree. And from an ecosystem perspective, where do you see senior executives still underestimating the operational or market structure complexity of ETFs?
I would say there's two different areas. The first is capital markets. It's absolutely imperative, and we say this all the time to clients getting into the ETF ecosystem. You have to understand the capital markets. It's different than mutual funds. You're not only trading in the primary market directly with the investor, which in this case would be the authorized participant, but you're trading in the secondary market. And market quality is imperative to the success and the failure of ETFs. So capital markets is always an area that we emphasize that you have to pay attention to it. You have to have experience there, or it's going to impact your end investors, and that's not going to be good for your strategy as far as growing your ETF assets. The second area is distribution, and it's the way ETFs are designed, they're opaque to the market. Again, mutual funds, you have insight into who your investors are. ETFs, they trade in the secondary market, and that insight disappears. So you have to pivot to purchasing potentially data packs. You have to work with market makers or platforms to get insight into the buyers. You have to hire data engineers to mine information to get to the buyer. So ultimately, you can pay your wholesalers, you can know who your buyers are. So the opaqueness of the product, although I think it's pretty well known coming into the ETF market, you still have active managers indicating that they didn't understand how opaque it was.
Periods of market stress have been defining moments for ETFs. What key lesson did the industry learn about liquidity and resilience that still isn't fully appreciated?
Yeah, I don't know if it's not fully appreciated because ETFs continue to prove themselves. They perform exceptionally well during periods of market stress. Think back to the latest, real market stress, which was around COVID, but the financial crisis going back to 2008, 2009, they become price discovery tools. They become the actual tool that, especially in more opaque markets, how investors determine what real pricing actually is in the market. And it you wind up getting more market participants join during market stress. And that shows that capitalism works. When there's more volatility, there's more money to be made as an authorized participant or a market maker. So you see more participants come into the market, which overall is more effective for price discovery and having a broader ecosystem that's competing to get the best price for the end investor.
And going back to active ETFs, if we go back to 2008, the first ETF was ticker YYY. Most people question, why do we need active ETFs? What do you think the industry misunderstood back then about active ETFs, and what ultimately unlocked their growth?
Yeah, I think the regulatory environment had to catch up to where ETFs actually were. I mean, they needed to level the playing field. And like we could think about, like I'd say the market that was the most innovative earliest was Canada. Their mutual fund market and their ETF market were identical. So same set of regulations, which made it a lot easier for any type of asset manager to come into the ETF ecosystem. You wanted to come in with active strategies, you wanted to come in with passive, smart beta, you came in with the same set of rules. Whereas if you look at the US market and other markets around the globe, you had a different set of criteria to get into the market if you were an active manager. So you think about the US, you had to file for exemptive relief in order to launch an ETF strategy holistically. Then you had to file with the exchange for a rule change to allow for that active strategy to come to market individually for each product that came in. There was a lot of friction that existed. And I think when the regulator decided that we're going to eliminate that friction and make active and passive, in a sense, playing on the same playing field, it really unlocked the potential for active. And that's really brought a lot of the benefits to the structure. So you think as an active manager, what are the benefits to an ETF compared to a mutual fund? Well, in certain markets, after tax returns, the in-kind mechanism allowed you to be more tax efficient. You can eliminate some of the friction around costs. So again, I think active management, you have embedded commissions on a lot of those mutual fund strategies. Well, you eliminate that in the ETF. They don't carry that embedded commission structure. You have settlement costs that can be externalized into the bid-ask spread. So it's actually hitting the investors that are buying the ETF as opposed to spreading out to all investors. So you have after-tax performance and overall performance being improved. So I just think there's a better mousetrap that was created, and the regulators just had to catch up to the fact that active and passive should be playing in the same playing field, and this allows for the ability for active to participate.
Thank you so much, Frank, and thank you to all of you for watching. In part 2, we'll look at how ETFs have proven themselves in periods of market stress and what's next for the ETF industry. So do join us for the next episode. To watch prior episodes and to stay up to date with the latest in the ETF industry, visit us at etftv.net. Thank you.